Hey there, welcome to House Talk. On this episode, we're going to be talking about getting out in front of the home inspection. These are incredibly important techniques to help prevent the home inspection from blowing up the deal, from wasting your time, from wasting your client's time, and for even looking embarrassed when it comes time for home inspection. For this conversation, we brought in Bruce Phares. He's a Windermere agent in the Seattle region. So Bruce, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to be with you, Dylan.
Yeah, thanks for being here, man. So, Bruce, why don't you start out just a little bit about your business? We worked together years ago, and you've been doing this for quite a long time. So, tell me a little bit about your experience here.
Righto, righto. Yeah, I'm a 30 plus year veteran in the business, one of the old turtles out there, and I've had a kind of a different trajectory and path on the business, and that started out quite early. This is back. I joined, oh God, in '86 or '87 into the industry, and fairly quickly, at that time, there was not buyer representation allowed in the state of Washington, in most states that is, and as a result of that, when you were working with a buyer, you would be considered a sub-agent of the seller. All agents were considered sub-agents of the sellers, and then your person that you were working with, your buyer, was considered by law your customer. And a lot of us people who actually kind of thought about it realized that's kind of bizarre. When I'm helping my mom buy a house, I got to actually disclose to the seller's agent that my mom's willing to pay more than she says she is on paper.
Yeah.
So I just had a real problem with that. There were obviously a number of people who were having a problem with it at the same time. So at that point, there was sort of an evolution taking place here in town, and led by a guy named Jim Stacy, who had a realty private brokerage up on Finney Ridge. And what Jim did was he just kind of broke from the crowd, and he said, "Forget it. I'm gonna go ahead and declare myself a representative of the purchaser on paper whenever I write." So he would strike out that portion of the contract that stated that the agent was a sub-agent.
Mm-hmm.
And there were a number of us that would get together and talk about this, and I decided to go ahead and swim in that deep water as well. And it wasn't very popular. But as a result of that, I'll make the story short, but as a result of that, I ended up with one client that was a real problematic client. The transaction just completely blew up, and I had to throw a whole bunch of money at it to make sure that people weren't really upset in the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with a buyer. And as a result of that, there was one person who was the sort of assistant to that buyer at a law firm here in town. And she called me up a year later and said, "I want to buy a house. I saw how you dealt with this gentleman." And as a result of that, she then started referring us to all of the young attorneys at this law firm. And all of a sudden, we became almost primarily buyer's agents. We were helping all of these young associates who were attorneys. And the attorneys, of course, had a much different approach to purchasing a house and looking at contracts and doing due diligence. They were already trained in doing that. So that rubbed off on us. We ended up having, we ended up having a business that was primarily buyer representation, as opposed to the standard model in the industry of securing listings and then hanging out open houses and meeting complete strangers and working with them.
Interesting.
We had the relationships that we had started out quite warm and quite trusting, and were very collaborative.
Yeah.
So as a result of that, that's how our business got built. And now here I am 30 years later, and a lot of my business still is working with those people that I've worked with 2, 3, 4 times out of the past, and having a real strong relationship. So I think, germane to what you want to talk about today, part of what we picked up very quickly was, if you're going to go into a negotiation, you need to do your due diligence. If you're an attorney and you're helping, some plane company buy planes from Boeing, or just the opposite, if you're helping Boeing sell planes, you better know about the competition. You better understand the product that you're dealing with, right? And you better understand the playing field.
Yeah,
so
fascinating.
It didn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out fairly quickly.
Yep. Yeah, and that's kind of ups the game pretty quickly, right? And now, but how beautiful, you up your game, and now you've got this whole stock of attorneys that are ready to buy houses with you.
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not the only ones. I always say to clients when I first meet them and they're interviewing, we're not the only people in town that do a good job. Seattle is a place where there are a lot of really great agents that have been taught by you put 5 agents in a room and you ask them about a particular topic. It's kind of like the 5 blind men and the elephant. All of them have had different anecdotal experiences that have given them the wisdom that they have. They they bring that to their client,
Yeah.
and a lot of people who are proud of doing that, they do it.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and that kind of gets us to the story. So, Bruce and I were working together years ago. I mean, it's probably 10 or 15 years ago now, and I was sort of a new-ish inspector. I mean, not new, but I hadn't had this happen to me. I'm driving up to the home inspection, we'd schedule it, and Bruce comes running out into the driveway to sort of intercept me, and I sort of roll down the window. Hey, Bruce, what's going on? And he goes, I'm really sorry you're here. And it was so great. Why don't you tell me a little bit about like why you did that? You scheduled this home inspector to show
It
up.
wasn't until you reminded me that I remember that. But basically, what happened was I was out of town, and my client had seen a house on. A typical house hits the market. They see it. It's all shiny and fancy, and it's got all Martha Stewart and all that stuff. So it's a cute little old house, and they email me and say, oh my God, we found the house of our dreams. So I come back into town and show up just in time for the inspection. And I haven't seen the house yet. I haven't had a chance to check it out myself. And as I go through it with my buyer, I'm just seeing defect after defect after defect after defect,
Yeah.
things that really indicate to me it's not something they want to get involved with. I mean, I look at the long-term relationship. I'll digress for a second, but I look at the long-term. If you're going to buy a house, you're buying a long-term relationship. You're entering into a relationship with something that's really upset it got built.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and it's doing everything it can to fall apart. So I was going, oh boy, this is a mistake. And of course, I was really embarrassed because this was honestly, Dylan, you were somewhat newish, but you were then even. How do I say this? Even then, it was very clear that you were a step above your standard inspector, and I didn't want to sully that relationship. So I went running out. I felt terrible. And I went, dude, I'm really sorry, but this is what do we do here? Because this is not a house that I want her to even spend money on. I think I asked you, what do you charge for a cancellation?
Yeah.
Let's go have a cup of coffee.
I was more optimistic, but I'm not certain we made it through the first hour of it until the wheels started coming off of everything, right?
Oh, that's right. I think you said, well, let's go check it out anyway, right?
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing. It's like, I think that agents need to be super I need to be super collaborative with the inspector. I want to engage with them. I want to, if I've got a buyer that's never bought a house and they don't understand that a GFCI is really a $20 item plus the service charge versus, they're thinking, oh my God, that's the same thing as a brand new roof. I want to have a conversation with the inspector so that there's context to some of those words, right?
Yeah, that's right. And that's hugely important as the home inspector. I try to explain, like, look, there's what I call a noise of a home inspection. And if you hire me to show up somewhere, I'm going to make a list, and there's a good chance it'll be 20, 30 items. And you have to be able to put these things in context. And I work really hard. I tried to create a report software that puts them in context and wrote a book to explain it. And
right.
It's the thing that always drives you nuts as a home inspector is you hear, oh, that home inspector was just too picky. And it's like, well, do we want to know about the house or don't we?
Yeah, right. That's what I'm supposed to do.
That's right. And so we really need collaborative to work with an agent to help put these things in context so that we work together so that we can be detailed and thorough, but also, get people worrying about the things they should worry about and not worrying about the sort of mundane noise of a home inspection stuff.
So that's the thing that the agent should be doing. Now I'm on my soapbox, but I'll just say what, I have a team of a couple people that I work with that are really great guys and gals, and I've trained them basically how to show a house and how to view a house. So when I go running into a house to preview it for a purchaser, first thing I do is go running downstairs. So there's sort of a list of things I want to look at, and I really want to look at it primarily through the inspector's eyes. What can I remember about how Dylan talks about a property and how he's gone about his inspections, that I can do that and run through and see whether or not this is going to be something that's going to be problematic. I mean, it's just not that tough for me to figure out that the mid-century floor plan of this property is exactly what my buyer's been asking for. It's not that tough to see that the view looking out over the lake is something that my buyer's been wanting. So that part's easy. It's like, let's take a look at this thing and let's not get too far down the road unless we have to. So it's the same thing when I'm showing the house, before we've even gone to the property, and especially with technology being so advanced at this point, there's so many research tools available to me. God, I'll try to,
Tell us about a
pull
few.
my little list here.
This is now just we're sort of getting oriented here, but this is before you even show up at a house. You've got a whole series of things you like to do to sort of get prepped,
Yeah,
get out in front
I'm,
of it.
I'm going to try not to digress here, but it's kind of like it's also time management, and it's also client representation, and it's also just being professional.
Yep.
But there have been, after 30 years, there have been so many questions that have come up as a result of an inspection that we then had to go out and research. Again, it didn't take a rocket scientist in my brain to realize at some point I needed to just go ahead and have a list. And then again, the dim bulb went off at some point, and I realized, why don't I do this on the front end instead of the back end, right?
That's what we're talking about, right?
If I've got a house that I'm showing that's in a ravine, perhaps I want to take a look at whether or not it's a known slide area or not, right?
Yep.
Do I want to have that information? And do I want to give it to my buyer? And I can't tell you how many inspections now, how many times my buyer's gotten excited about a property that comes up on the web, it shows up in the MLS, we all get our email, bing, there's a new listing, we go check it out, I click a couple buttons, and bing, there's I'm in Seattle, so there's the city of Seattle steep slope thing, and there's the house, inside that red zone.
Yep.
And I send it back over to my buyer and say, take a look at this, it looks like this may be in a slide area. And the email comes back over from my attorney or my doctor or whatever, and they go, yes, forget it, next, right?
Yeah.
And we haven't wasted. That's time management. We haven't wasted any time.
Yeah.
And I haven't gotten to the inspection, and the inspector kind of scratches their head and looks and goes, so do you have a soil specialist lined up for this? And I'm like, no, gosh, I don't.
Yeah, that can be really embarrassing. I mean, I showed up to one, and
how many times have you done that? It's like
Yeah, and it's one of them I was thinking of. It was a 1920 house, and the client, I asked if they have any particular concerns, and they were just, I really hope there's no lead and asbestos in this house. And it was like, oh, geez,
yeah, right.
Like it's 19, I mean, what? That's really disheartening, and because it's one of those questions right at the outset where it's like, well, they don't even understand the scope of a home inspection, and they're just, totally off of like their understanding eras. And there's certain to me, this all begins with just learning to sort houses by age, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So we have a picture up here if you're listening of just this mid-century home, but I can look at this house and Bruce can look at this house, and a whole list starts populating in my head. Like, I know what the floor plan's like. I'm instantly going to know, well, is it steel pipe or is it updated copper pipe?
Exactly. And look at that beautiful, look at that concrete sill to the left of the steps there. We know that this is post-war concrete, and that concrete has a beautiful molecular content. Therefore, this property has a lot less tendency to have already settled at some point in its life.
That's right. Yeah.
And in order to get my buyers to engage in these conversations, because sometimes they do, I've watched so many inspections where the buyer's standing there. It's the first time they've been through an inspection, the first time they've even looked at a house seriously, and the inspector's talking away, and they're just glossed over. They're not engaging, right? Mm-hmm. So when I take them down in the basement in a home of this age, I'll put my hands up against the cement and I go, ooh, I love this stuff. And they kind of chuckle and go, you're being weird. And I go, let me tell you why.
Yeah.
There was this war called World War II, and as a result of that, there were these bombs being thrown at each other, and these different countries figured out they needed to up their concrete technique in order to protect themselves from those bombs. And the funny thing is that after that happened, all of a sudden, the concrete was being poured in the foundations started getting to be a higher quality.
Yeah, and reinforced, right? Yeah.
Right? And they all of a sudden have some context to why there's concrete, why there's glass, why there's steel, why there's copper, right? And that it helps them engage. I mean, I know it's kind of geeky, but
Bruce, this is
that conversation going.
And this is, I actually have a class that I teach to home inspectors called Storytelling for Home Inspection and Report Writing.
All right.
That's but everybody thinks, I still can't get one of our national people to want to put it on, but storytelling is an art, and mastering it, and I think every story to me is an arrow that I have in my quiver to explain a complex subject quickly, to where I know my client won't ever forget it. People remember stories, so that's great. So I think
so as an agent, there's a way to do that. There's a way to tell a story as you show the house. So let's go. I'm going to go walk you through a house, and I'm going to use you, the inspector, as my story. So as we walk in, they want to show me they want to take a look at the floor plan. They want to see the master bedroom and what they did to the kitchen. And I let them go for a while. And then finally I say, okay, you guys done now? Let's go see the bones. Let's go look at this the way Dylan's going to look at it. So we go downstairs, we take a look, we walk up to where the chimney comes down and see the base of the chimney. We walk up to the furnace. We look for any, is there any signs of water staining down the bottom? Is the bottom of the furnace rusted? Yeah. We're looking at the foundation. We're looking up at the sill. We're looking up at those points between the joists and seeing whether or not we've got diagonal flooring or not. I mean, is this a 1915, a 1900 house? Is it a 1937?
Yeah.
We want to see those different things. If there is settling over, and you've seen this in a million houses in Seattle, where if it was built prior to 1935 or so, they probably didn't compact the ground underneath it. So there's always going to be 1/4 of that house that's settled over in the corner.
Yeah.
Let's go take a look at it and see whether or not we need to call up a specialist along with the inspector that's going to come along.
Yeah.
Because the inspector's going to look down and point and go, "Did you see this?" It's like, "Yeah, we did. That's great." Right.
Yeah.
And we it's just not rocket scientist kind of stuff. And I don't think the agent is actually placing themselves in peril by attempting to point out the mistakes that they can see, the defects in the property.
Yep.
Is the cast iron waistline that comes down the center of the property, has it been cut out in the middle and there's a big ABS replacement piece in there? Does that tell you a story?
Yep.
Is there a new clean out cover? Maybe we should be thinking about going and pulling the well, we probably have, but we would be pulling the records on the sewer line, right? Yep. Before we go in there.
Yeah.
Another great thing that you can do as an agent, really honestly, is in preparing, is the MLS makes it so easy. When I click open a listing on the MLS on my dashboard as an agent, I'm able to click another button right there that shows me the previous listing. So if this house has been listed 5 times, right? Yeah. And I'm able to pull up the previous listings and look, oftentimes in the remarks, there may be comments about some issues that I would want to have some advanced research before we go to the property.
Yeah.
And one more, this one's really the super no-brainer. If you pull up a property and it's been active for 800 days and you see that it's gone active, pending, failed, back on market, active, pending inspection, pending, failed, back on market.
Yeah. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah, right.
Right. Yeah.
Press the big red button, there's something going on.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, and you brought up something that to me that is really, I really appreciate when I'm working with agents that are getting out in front of the home inspection, because I've had the experience of doing some where, let's say 4 big things come up. It needs a new roof, there's some structural settlement, there's a drainage problem, and it needs a new furnace. And and every one of those things the agent got out in front of it. So when I'm doing it, none of those things are a surprise at this point.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because it's like, if all of those things were a surprise, that was a terrible home inspection. If none of those things were a surprise, like, well, you already knew about it, right?
Right. Exactly.
There's no new data that was brought up, and that's just a great, and if those were the 4 things that were going to blow up the deal, then why not try to get to those things before I show up? And it saves everybody a ton of time and a ton of money, and you just push on, So, and that, another one of the philosophies I came to in writing my book was, every house is a great house for the right person at the right price.
Absolutely.
So just because a house has a structure problem doesn't make it a bad house. It's a data point. It could cost some money to fix. And so we're looking at then price point and every buyer, if you have, you're working with your clients are a young couple that just had twin babies and they have a 3-year-old, then their ability to do a whole bunch of work to the house is probably pretty low. They're just too busy. And so you need more of a turnkey house. Other people are looking for a fixer, right?
Right. I think, whoops, my Slack thing is going off there. I think that if you're an agent these days, you need to be careful to protect yourself against the dumbing down of the industry, which is designed to basically protect the brokerages first. And I understand, it's a really interesting relationship between agents and brokerages, but brokerages are understandably attempting to protect themselves legally from mistakes that are going to happen. What is it? I don't know if I said in this story or not, but every house is I tell my first time buyers, you're about to enter into a contract with a property that is very pissed off that it got built and it wants to go back down to ground. And your job is to keep it alive, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And some houses are easier than others. So if you're deciding that you're going to go out and swim in that deep water rather than stay in the shallow water of not knowing anything about structures, which is a really frustrating thing for me,
Yep.
you need to be willing to take on some knowledge. And the first thing you do, you know, this is a shallow advertisement for you, but the first thing you do is you go buy Dylan's book and you read it, right?
Yeah.
And you start there. You start by starting to fill your head. And no, you're not going to get everything right out of the chute, but you're going to start creating up in that brain of yours a platform, a room that starts thinking about structures in a different way. And then you're going to walk around with your inspectors and you're going to listen carefully. And you're going to, when they say something you don't understand, you're going to ask, what does that mean?
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. It's a
Talk
free
to me
class.
more about it.
Right? It's
Right? Free class. I know. It's like how many times our young guy that joined us recently, he just can't wait to get on inspections. It's just, he's so excited because he just eats it up.
Yep.
So you save time, and you, as an agent, like you said, if you see that you've got a furnace that's destroyed, right, and if you see that you've got a roof that's peeling off, when you show the house initially, for goodness sake, make the phone calls and get those specialists out there in that same time period.
Yep.
Ideally, I've got one out there before Dylan even shows up, and I can say, yeah, look at this. Here's the bid I got on it, and Dylan goes, wow, that's a good price, or wow, I think maybe you want to get somebody else out there for a bid on that one, right?
That's right.
But there's that kind of engagement. Your client, like you said, is going like, wow, this is really a great inspection. I'm getting a number of experts that are counseling me on the realities of this monumentally complex organism.
Yep.
You know, that house is alive, and it's you know, you gotta work with it.
Yep.
And so it's a completely different thing. So it's time management. It's client representation, it's professionalism, it's respect.
Yeah.
You know, I like to respect my inspectors when I'm out there. I'll say this, one thing that really frustrates me these days is Dylan won't come over and do my inspections in Seattle anymore because he's so busy over in Bainbridge Island. But it's respect for your inspector.
Yeah.
And then finally, it's respect for yourself. You look yourself in the mirror at night and you pat yourself on the back and you go to sleep, and you don't wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh, geez, did I not call so-and-so about such and such, and I've only got 3 more days on my inspection contingency before I get that information. Or the worst of it, you know, forgive me for just going crazy here, but the worst of it has been this market that we had for the last 4 years here in Seattle, where you were dealing with limited time frames to gather information prior to writing an offer that your client was going to offer 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000, 80,000, $150,000 over list price, right? You're trying to because there's nothing that frustrates a buyer more than offering $120,000 over list price for a property, and then all of a sudden finding, you know, a defect that nobody caught because there was no time.
Yeah.
And that's the person that's going to come back and sue everybody when they're really, really upset about it.
Yeah.
Right?
This market out here, has struck me as being very risky and really important to be able to get out in front of the inspection, because there's just simply not time
it really was.
Data.
I mean, it was like luckily it's somewhat, it has calmed down here, but it was like I won't get off the market thing too much, but it was kind of like looking down on a basketball court, only you had 6 different basketball courts. You had 12 different sets of hoops, and you had 4 different teams playing simultaneously. I mean, you're just running back and forth and back and forth and back and forth.
Crazy.
But I think what that did was it really drove home. I think that caused some evolution in the industry. Both on your guys' end and on our end. I think there were far too many inspectors that got in thinking they could inspect, and there were far too many agents that got in, and technology allowed these agents to get in and write offers and know nothing about the structures. Yeah. And I think that's my big pet peeve. All the good inspectors I know, they're frustrated, and they can't really call out an agent during an inspection and go, are you serious? I mean, are you really that stupid about a house? You can't do that.
You can't do that.
So you're delicately trying to counsel. Well, let me actually be asking you. I mean, on those moments where you're dealing with what I'll call a hostile agent who's just after the deal, and they're challenging you as you provide information, how do you manage that? How do you mentally deal with that?
It can be incredibly frustrating. The goal to me is always to just try to remain professional and calm, you know. And that's, as a home inspector, I think a really important attribute is just steady hand on the tiller. I mean,
Yeah, right.
you want to try to not get super emotional about anything, and you're gathering data and presenting it. And sometimes there are a lot of impediments to that process, and it can be hard. I mean, it can get emotional, but I do everything I can to try to turn that stuff off and just, you try to be Spock, right? But
I
another
think you told me once that you also have another technique, and that is you remember the phone number of that agent. The next time they call, you somehow don't answer it.
Yeah, well, I mean, usually these things become abundantly clear. It's a self-selecting process, right? That people that want to
Yes.
work with you and the ones that don't. But one final point I want to make about this that I just think is so important is I see Zillow and Silicon Valley and some of these bigger companies as really coming after the real estate industry. And I have learned as a home inspector over 17 years of doing this
Oh yeah.
how
You
incredibly valuable great real estate agents are. They just
not really.
literally, it's it's an invaluable service, and they will not get replaced by an app, but the sort of low bar old model of sales, I think, can get replaced. So I think, and there's an element of this of just self-preservation too, to keep your industry alive.
Yeah, I lost the signal there, but I think I got the gist of what you're saying.
Yeah.
I see if you take a more holistic approach to that whole thing, this industry that I'm in is kind of like a big bunch of caribou, and there have been way too many that have gotten into it that don't know what they're doing. And as a result, there's a lot of really poor representation taking place out there, and those customers and clients that end up seeing that as that's their whole universe, was what their one experience was with a bad agent. It's understandable that they make a different choice the next time they decide to get into a transaction.
Yeah,
right.
Easier to go.
So that's the sad side there. But at the same time, let those apps then take those people out. Let's get those guys out of there if we possibly can. There are a lot of us old timers that are willing to put in 6 and 7 day weeks doing what we're doing, and we're pretty frustrated about it. But you stay, like you said, you just steady the tiller with your client.
Yeah, and you find your people that appreciate the value that you deliver, right? I mean,
I mostly do. There are some newer clients that I've got that work in their culture, the culture that they have grown up in, and the culture that they work in hasn't spent much time trying to help them differentiate what I'll call quality representation, and they have a tendency to kind of not pay that much attention to it. And but those are the people that don't refer out anyway. They just don't think on the level that a lot of us older people think on. So, again, you do the best you can, and when it's all over, they're like, yeah, whatever, see you later, bye.
Yep.
And that's the end of that. And on the same time, I've got clients that I worked with 35 years ago, and we're still best friends, and they still call me before they paint their house. They ask me, what do I need to know, and what colors are we doing these days, and we're thinking about doing this, or we need a new furnace. Who do you want me to put in there? And they're not calling who do we do. They're asking who do Bruce and Donna want to work on this house.
Yeah,
and they know, we may be out of the business by the time they sell the house, but we made that compact with them when they bought the house. We will always be there to talk with you about the house, not because I want your business, because I care about this structure.
Yeah.
You bought one of the better ones. You made a great choice. You've done a great job of shepherding and stewarding this property, right? It's a matter of pride to me. They're like little boats out there that people own that they ended up, I helped them get.
Yeah, no, that's really awesome.
Analogy.
Well, this has been a great conversation about, I think it's, really evolved, and this has been more about the importance of getting out in front of the home inspection, but also, how that relates to your whole business model, how it relates to your ability to really grow a real estate business that supports itself. I mean, you're not necessarily taking millions of dollars of ads. You have this whole referral base, and that's creating value and relationships that really make our job fun and more interesting. So that's great stuff, Bruce. So a pleasure.
Well, Dylan, thanks, man. It's a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, listen, if you're
I'll
listening,
say one last thing here, guys.
What's that?
One last thing, one last thing, everybody. If you're listening to this thing, there's one more thing to take advantage of. Dylan and I know you do this with other agents, and I know other agents do it with other inspectors. it's important that we call each other up and talk to each other. We have conversations that are outside of inspections. We check in with each other. We ask questions, have conversations.
Yeah.
It's Dylan and any inspector that you're working with out there. That's a great resource, and they love usually engaging with you as well. So if you see a weird roof, take some photographs of it, send it over to them, and talk to them about it.
Yeah.
It's an incredible resource, and I'm very thankful, Dylan, that you're willing to do that with these different agents like myself.
No, and it's the relationships are what keep the business fun, and interesting, and so and the mutual respect and working together to help a client is really fun and exciting. It's a part of the business that I love, and I think, we've been sort of outlining techniques and strategies for doing that. So really, really good stuff here. And listen, if you're listening, we'll try to put. I've got a blog attached to this, but when I proposed this idea to Bruce, he did this awesome, just sort of freehand, list of all the things that he does, kind of preparing a buyer to look at a house. So we'll include that in the blog. And this, the neat thing about this is it's not something that an agent is going to have. There's no one way to do it. You slowly add arrows to your quiver of techniques for getting out in front of the home inspection, and over time you just get better and better at it. And it's valuable. It's a truly, once you get good at something like this, you bring value to the table that is just not replaceable by an app. So good stuff, Bruce. Thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate having you, man.
You too, man. Always good to talk with you.
All right. Cheers.
Adios.
Hey, a big thanks to our sponsors today. I want to thank Scribeware Home Inspection Report Software for your efforts to transform the home inspection report writing industry. For Dylan Chalk, the Confident House Hunter, a fabulous resource for home buyers and realtors for getting out in front of the home inspection. And as always, thanks to Dylan Chalk House Talk for hosting this podcast. Thanks for your support. Hey, a big thanks to our sponsors today. I want to thank Scribeware Home Inspection Report Software for your efforts to transform the home inspection report writing industry. For Dylan Chalk, the Confident House Hunter, a fabulous resource for home buyers and realtors for getting out in front of the home inspection. And as always, thanks to Dylan Chalk House Talk for hosting this podcast. Thanks for your support.